Thank you. I haven't really, I don't have a full paper, synopsis and some bullet points, but hopefully I'll try to be, brief, and maybe I would love to hear comments and reflections. So basically, the notion of leadership in Islam is rooted in the Quran. Um, The religious leader par excellence in the Quran are the prophets who dedicated themselves to promoting truth about the meaning of life and whose actions exemplify the moral values associated with the divine. Uh, and of course, the Quran presents God as a moral being. And of course, we know Muslims know God through are called his beautiful names. And these are moral qualities um, that have been a part of the elaborate discussion by Islamic scholars. Now, the term associated with leadership in the Quran is imam. Imam is a leader, is the leader. And the word is derived from the root amama, A-M-M. From this root, also several other words are derived, including the word ummah, meaning community, the word amam, meaning front, and that's where leadership comes. Leaders move at the front to show the way and to take the risk as well, as always happens with those who move in the front in a not clearly defined human condition. And imam, of course, which is leader. Um, and from that, we have the word imama, which is leadership, imama. Now, the term imam is coined by the Quran. In fact, we don't find it really in the pre-Islamic literature, as many words that have been coined by the Quran, and has been used by Muslim scholars in early centuries of Islam to refer to the distinguished religious authorities, including the founders of the main schools of Islamic law. So within the Sunni tradition, you have currently four schools of Islamic law, but at one time there were like 10, 12 schools. So the founders used to be called imam. And later on, the word imam also was used within the Sunni tradition to refer to any scholar with high following. An outstanding scholar of Islam was be called an imam. Like the one who collected the hadith of the Prophet, Imam Bukhari. Some people refer to him as Imam Bukhari. But within the Shia tradition, the word imam is preserved to the cousin of the Prophet Ali and his descent, his offspring. And of course, Shia are divided into many sects. The more well-known and maybe the greater in number would be the Ithnai Ashari, um, where majority of people in Iran are follow that tradition, and you have the Ismaili, which is so the Ismaili have 7 imams. Actually, they have 12 imam. Um, Let me say a few things about the concept of leadership in the Quran. I'll start by introducing how the Quran uses it, but I'll also come back to it later after saying a few words about how the word imam, where do we meet or encounter, let's say, the word imam within the Islamic literature. So the Quran, the first time we hear this word, this term imam or leader, is in the second chapter of the Quran. Of course, the first chapter is very short, 7 verses. This is the opening. But practically the first long chapter is chapter 2. And in verse 24, the Quran brings this term, Imam. And the verse reads, remember when Abraham was tested with his Lord with certain commandments, which he fulfilled. Allah said, I will certainly make you into an Imam, meaning leader, role model for the people or for the nation, whatever you want to translate it into English. Abraham asked, what about my offspring? Allah replied, my covenant is not extended to the wrongdoers. So within the offspring of Abraham, those who are righteous people will inherit the message, and that's what happened with the children with the prophets, the Hebrew prophets, many of them, as we all know, numerous number. The Quran mentioned probably about 12 of them, but I'm sure in the Bible there are much more. The number is much more than that. Now, leadership is often associated with prophets, but it is not exclusive to them. Again, we find in the Quran such a verse, chapter 24, starts by saying, the true servants of the most compassionate are those who walk on earth with humbleness or humility. And when the foolish address them improperly, they only respond with peace. And then 8 verses down, which where the word imam also, leader, is brought up. They are those who pray, our Lord bless us with pious spouses and offspring, who will be the joy of our hearts and make us imam or leaders among the righteous. So this is like a believer would pray to be an imam, to be a moral role model, and so it is not exclusively reserved to the prophets. All believers should, maybe, I mean, if you read the Quran, this verse either should or could aspire for leadership. While prophets were sent to serve as moral models to their communities, they were also expected to confront corruption and tyranny and lead their communities to a life of dignity and empowerment. In fact, interestingly, we find, like, if you read the life of the prophets in the Quran, you find that all of them were sent to their communities at a time of great mischief and great tyranny. And maybe among their major tasks were to confront, to speak truth to power. That's what Prophet did, always. And of course, this picture appears very clearly with the Hebrew prophets. Hebrew prophets were always coming to challenge the kings and the high priests as well. The high priests were they were critical of failure of high priests to uphold the covenant. And so the Quran says, for example, about how it is an obligation on the moral leaders to confront corruption and tyranny, and say, O Prophet, this is truth. This is the truth from your Lord. Whoever wills, let them believe, and whoever wills, let them disbelieve. So while they are asked to speak truth to power, it's not about imposition and being like rude, but it's about being truthful. Something that we all know is not easy to do. And so when we look at leadership in the Quran, we find that there are 3 qualities that always emphasize when the Quran mentions leadership: wisdom or judgment, and the Quran sometimes uses those terms exchangeably, meaning good judgment or right judgment, strength, and compassion. So I'll come back to say a bit to review some of the connotations and the contexts of the Quranic usage of those terms. But let me first turn to talk a bit about leadership within Islamic literature. Now, the term leaders and leadership continue to be associated with overarching qualities of wisdom, competence, and compassion. So those qualities that emphasize in the Quran, we find them also emphasized within Islamic literature. Islamic scholarship paid a lot of attention to leadership, and the term leader continued up throughout the first 8 centuries of Islam. Today, if you read Arabic literature, for example, you find like people talks when they talk about leaders, they talk about qada, qa'id, qada, um, but they don't use the term imam and imama. Why that was the term initially used for a long time. Um, The term imam was reserved to people who combine knowledge of Islamic normative sources, particularly those who provided exemplary moral character. So for a person to be called imam in literature has to have these kind of two sides. One, these people are knowledgeable, they are scholars, they study the Islamic sources and they try to expand on them. Sort of like a rabbi-like or priest-like function. And of course, they're expected to have a moral commitment to those values that they teach. So they teach. Usually, the imam is expected to either be a religious authority, like what I mentioned so far, but we'll see that the imam also used to connote political authority. Um, Now, early use of imam was made in relation to the founders of, as I said, of the main Islamic school of law, whether mainly within the Sunni tradition, but the Shia was used in reference to the offspring of Ali bin Abi Talib, the cousin of the Prophet. And among the early work on leadership, one can, for example, encounter a book by Ibn Qutaybiyah, who lived in the late second century of Islam, which is like the 9th century of the Common Era. He has a book called Al-Imama wa Siyasa, Leadership and Politics, in which he really looked into leadership within the early phase of the Islamic era. During just after the life of the Prophet, there was a lot of challenges, and there were many leaders that he discussed, and he expounded on their character and their role, etc. We find it also in the work of someone like Al-Mawardi. Al-Mawardi has a book called Ahkam al-Sultaniya, or the Sultanic Rules. This is mainly a work on political administration and political structure. And he tackled the question of imama. And of course, the highest authority, political authority in this discourse, and for many also Muslim scholars, the highest authority, political authority, is called imam. And of course, the highest authority was expected to combine both knowledge and learning. So the leaders must be learned individuals within the community, and many of them really were quite given to learning. And all of them went through schooling before they became imam. And the other one would be the qualities they should have, including maybe utmost among which would be just and fair rulers, as well as competent rulers. Okay. So now with this, let me turn to talk about the three areas that emphasized in the Quran with regard to leadership. Uh, um, Number one is um, knowledge, wisdom and knowledge. Number two is strength, uh, mainly strength of faith and patience and perseverance and resolve. And the third one is compassion. So when we look at the issue of knowledge, we find that the Quran really pays a lot of emphasis on knowledge. And really not only knowledge, but the Quran calls wisdom, hikmah. So leaders are expected to be knowledgeable and well informed. Of course, hikmah in the Quranic usage is a combination of knowledge grounded or anchored in moral values. So to be knowledgeable only is not enough to really to lead. You have to have a moral character that will guide you always to make decisions that are based on some universal values like passion, compassion, justice, respect of dignity of others, concerns about common good, and etc. They are not to be they are not to be functioning members of their community alone, but to acquire the necessary specialized knowledge and insight in areas in which they exercise leadership. And so if you'd like to lead, then you have to know, that area, that sphere where you are going to lead in. And again, to see how leadership is used in the context of wisdom and competence or strength. We find, for example, in the Quranic reference to the conversation between Joseph, that is, and the king of Egypt. The story is really doesn't mirror exactly the one in the Bible, but it's very close. There are some important distinction, but the flow is almost the same. So after he was imprisoned and sort of interpreted the dream and was like released from prison through intercession of one of his co-prisoners. I mean, those mates that he served with them. He spoke to the king and told him, "Set me over the storehouses of the land. I am indeed trustworthy and knowledgeable." So these are the qualities that he emphasized. Of course, this is a revelation. It's not like a story, but the Quran narrating this, and so it has the authority of the Quran, and probably those who read the Quran that they realize that the Quran speak mainly in the voice of the divine. It's not like somebody describing what the divine said or etc. But exactly it's about a message from the divine to the believer. And so, as such, these two qualities is really emphasized here: trustworthiness, which is about being sincere, being honesty, being truthful, and knowledgeable. Because, of course, competence here is emphasized because he was asking to be sort of the Secretary of Treasury within the kingdom, to use some modern term. So he would like to be the treasurer. And of course, he has already a resume because he was able to provide a prescription to avoid the famine, the 7 year of famine. So probably he was referencing that. Ultimately, however, it is not one scope of pure knowledge, ilm, that matters in the exercise of leadership, but one's ability to apply the knowledge obtained to practical situations, one's wisdom. We could see, for example, the importance of wisdom. Let me read this paragraph here. While ilm or knowledge knowledge and wisdom are closely interrelated. They have slightly different connotations. The term knowledge denotes the various ideas one receives about or has about nature and reality. This is still a draft, so I'm sorry if the language not always fluent. Whereas the terms wisdom or judgment, and the Quran uses those terms sometimes interchangeably because really judgment, that is sound judgment, reveals wisdom, which exactly what wisdom should be about, signify the way by which knowledge is brought to bear on action. More specifically, as is evident in Surah Al-Isra and Surah Luqman, these are two chapters in the Quran, wisdom consists in those principles that guide actions. For example, in Surah Al-Isra, wisdom is used in reference to such precepts as fulfill every engagement or pursue that of which you have pursue not that of which you have no knowledge. So the Quran really sort of lists down certain things that people shouldn't or should do. So no one should pursue anything without knowledge. That's what the Quran teaches here, which is like this is wisdom. I mean, fools only speak without knowledge, as we all know. Okay. Or pursue that, okay? It is for this reason that wisdom receives special emphasis in the Quran, where it is made abundantly clear in that wisdom is a source of blessing and goodness to those who possess it. This is again chapter 2, verse 269. He grants wisdom to whom he pleases, and he to whom wisdom is granted receive indeed a benefit overwhelming. But none will grasp the message, but men of understanding or people of understanding. It is also emphasized that wisdom has been essential quality of prophets. Let us say what the Quran says about Prophet Yahya or John. In chapter 19, verse 12, Quran says, "O John, O Yahya, take hold of the book with might, and we gave him wisdom even as a youth. وَأَتَيْنَاهُ الْحُكْمَ صَبِيًّا." We gave him judgment even as a youth, which is really, the Quran refers here to wisdom. Or when we read in chapter 28, verse 14, when he, referring to Musa here, Moses, reached full age and was firmly established in life, we bestowed on him wisdom and knowledge. For thus we reward those who do good. And we strengthened his kingdom. Of course, he referring to David, Dawood, in chapter 38, verse 20. And we strengthened his kingdom and gave him wisdom and sound judgment in speech and decision. So as you see here, wisdom is really core quality of leadership and emphasized time and again. And you can see clearly that really wisdom is about this combination of knowledge and sound judgment, which is what many of us today, when we talk about wisdom, talk about it in that sense. Now let me move to the second area of quality. This what I call strength in the broader sense of the term. I will explain what that means, which is really, when you think about it, it is faith grounded in moral discipline, strong faith grounded in moral discipline. For example, the Quran used the term sabr in reference to the importance of that quality, or what we call today resolve. A quick survey of Islamic literature shows that no virtue has more affinity with leadership than patience or resolve. I mean, patience not in the negative sense, but in the positive as resolve. The Quran emphasizes repeatedly the importance of patience for believers in general and for leaders in particular, and identifies it as one of two essential qualities of leadership, the other being conviction. And I guess when you have patience with conviction, that's where resolve comes. And if we read in the Quran, verse 32, sorry, chapter 32, verse 23, and we made from among them leaders, a'imma, that's the plural of imam, leaders giving guidance under our command, so long as they display patience and continued to demonstrate faith in our signs. And this was, of course, in reference to the children of Israel as they were led out from the servitude in Egypt, and they became really leaders later on and established quite astounding kingdom that's described in the Quran, but I can hardly find any reference to it in the book of history, and that is interesting. Resolve is essential to overcome the trials and tribulation of life, as we see in the Quran, chapter 2, 155. That is to say, verse 155. Be sure we shall test you with something of fear and hunger, some loss of goods or lives, or the fruits of your toil, but give glad tidings to those who patiently persevere. So again, perseverance. So these are trials of life. You are sort of saved if you don't encounter them. But if you encounter them, they know that this is part of the trial of life, and you should persevere, and then you will really be able to overcome those challenging times. Therefore, patiently persevere, as did the resolute among the prophets, and be in no haste with them, the unbelievers. And so, talking about encountering those who are really out to destroy you. So you have to be resolute, and if you do that, then God is engaging, will not forget you, and you will triumph if you are sticking with the moral principles that we said humans should follow and abide by, which are, by the way, the quality of the divine. And so what the quality of the divine, for example, in the Quran, like he is just, he is peaceful, he is faithful, meaning keep promises. He is he is living, he is loving, he is compassionate, he is merciful, etc., etc. So as you can tell, these are really qualities the Quran tells us, and the Hadith, of course, the tradition of the Prophet tells us, they are in abundance with the divine, they are limited with the human. So there is no comparison when we talk about divine mercy and our mercy, but still they come from the same source, because if the Quran says that we humans are made out of this clay of the earth, this biological entity that is our body, and the breath of the divine. So God breathed into Adam, and then Adam became the human that he is, knowledgeable, has the will, has the moral, the sort of innate moral principles of sense of justice, sense of beauty, etc., etc. The hadith also stresses the same thing. There is a hadith narrated by one of the sort of collector of the Prophet hadith, says, the strong among you is not the one who can overpower others, but the one who can control himself in the moment of anger. So again, this moral discipline, ability to stay calm as you are really outraged by what's going on around you. So you have to stay calm, hopefully challenge that anger into something positive to build a better future. Resolve and forbearance are important qualities for effective leadership. So let me now talk about some other elements of this strength as another area or set of qualities. This is what the Quran refers to as seriousness or earnestness. This quality is one of the qualities that distinguish leaders from others in their enterprise, in their life. Etc. So maybe rather than reading further, let me again, contextualize that as how the Quran sees this quality. The Quranic equivalence of the term earnestness is al-akhadh biquwwa, to take something with might. So in other words, you take responsibility with energy and with resolve and with might. So we read, for example, in reference to Ibrahim, and of course, Abraham is set in the Quran as the sort of the one of the highest, in fact, the highest moral example. And the Prophet of Islam is asked, and his followers asked to take him as a moral model of a person of faith. Abraham here, relate from the Abraham, he said what he told his people, when they insisted to worship those idols that he thought that, I mean, only fools would do that. They can help nobody, they can hurt nobody. Why do people worship them? In fact, of course, the Bible narrates, conversation between him and his father, that he asked his father was an idol maker. Why would you why we worship these idols? You make them, you carry them from one place to another. He said, well, if I don't do, I cannot, he agreed that maybe they are not worthy of worship, but he said, if I'm not going to do that, they will kill me. I mean, this society of pagans will not tolerate someone who does not acknowledge that these are gods to be worshipped. In the case of Moses, again, this is the Quran saying, in reference to this quality of taking things with might, and we ordained laws for him in the tablets in all matters, both commanding and explaining all things, and said, take and hold these with strength and enjoin your people to hold fast to the best of the precepts. Again, in reference to Musa, this is chapter 26, 22, and this is the favor with which you do reproach me, that you have enslaved the children of Israel. That's what Moses told Pharaoh when he tried to show him, I mean, I have a lot of favors on you. You grow up in my palace, and I took care of you. And then this is what he responded. So, and this is the favor with which you do reproach me, that you have enslaved the children of Israel. So yeah, maybe you have done that, but you have really made the life of my people, of this community, miserable. Okay, finally, let me talk about the last area of set of emphasis in the Quran on compassion. That's deep concern about and the commitment to the good of other human being. What the Quran says about what's about this quality, compassion. Of course, compassion is one of the names of God. So, in fact, God, in every chapter in the Quran, the chapter begins, except one chapter, but in all of them, it starts with, in the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. So, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim. So, Rahma, which is mercy, is emphasized, and in fact, the term compassionate or Rahman was not known to the Arabs. And in fact, one of their conversation, when every time the Prophet talked about the compassionate, they said, we don't know what the compassionate that you are talking about. They never had that term in reference to God. We have sent you, O Prophet, only as a mercy to the whole world. And so not only God is compassionate, but the mission of the Prophet Muhammad was to be a mercy to humanity, to the whole world, in fact. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. Al-alamin translated literally means the words. the plural of a word. And of course, the Mufassirun, the interpreter of the Quran, say the human, not only the human word, but also the animal word, and all the spheres of life on earth. So this compassion cannot be just directed to the believers, it has to be directed to every human being because they are all servants of God, or if you like to use the Christian term, children of God, or the children of God. It is by the mercy of Allah that you have been lenient with them, your followers, the believers. Were you severe or harsh-hearted, they would have broken away from you. So pass over their faults and ask for Allah's forgiveness to them and consult them in public affairs. So I'm going really to, I'm going to conclude here. Probably, I would like maybe to have some conversation if you'd like to engage with some of the things that I have thrown here. Hopefully with some coherence. As I said, a lot of these were sort of bullet points and maybe not incomplete, like narratives, not made into a complete paper. Hopefully I'll do that soon. But with this, I'm going to turn it over to the, is it Pascal held?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.